Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to UWA Anthropology Sociology Seminar Forum. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Western Australia is situated on the land of the Whadjuk people. We acknowledge them as the spiritual and cultural custodians of their land and continue to practice their values, languages, beliefs, and knowledge. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Today we welcome Muhammad Syukri, our PhD candidate. He's going to present his research on participatory village governance in the Indonesian new developmental state. And then Syukri will have about 35 to 40 minutes for presentation. Then we're going to have 20 minutes for question and answer. For those who are just for the first time joining our session, you can read our notes in the chat section. And today we're going to have Pak Gregory Akiayoli. It's always difficult for me to be the chair of today's seminar. And Pak Greg is also the supervisor of Mas Syukri. The time is yours.
Okay, terima kasih banyak. Thank you and welcome to everybody. Selamat datang, especially to those joining us from outside, from, for example, Indonesia at the SMERU Institute. So I'll be chairing, which simply means I'll be introducing the speaker and then calling on people for questions. Our speaker, Pak Muhammad Syukri, is currently a PhD candidate at Anthropology and Sociology here at the University of Western Australia. And for his PhD project, he's been researching the way in which the new policy of participatory governance in Indonesia has been dealing with marginal groups, such as poor. Particularly, he's been examining the impact of the village law of 2014. When he's back in Indonesia, Pak Syukri works as a researcher at the SMERU Research Institute, where his research focuses mainly on issues of village development, community empowerment, marginal groups, and social protections. He holds a bachelor's degree in Islamic law from the State Islamic University of Sunan Kalijaga in Yogyakarta, and a master's degree in sociology from Gadjah Mada University in the same city. So without further ado, here is Pak Syukri to present his final pre-submission seminar for the discipline group on the topic of participatory village governance in the Indonesian new developmental state.
Thank you very much, Pak Greg. I'll share my screen now. Can you see? No?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Yep.
Okay.
Take your time.
Can you see it?
Yes, it started the screen.
Yes? Okay, that's great. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. Today is a good day for me. Today I will discuss my PhD research project. It is my 7th semester. Yes, 3.5 years now. So hopefully I can finish my thesis by the end of this year, or at least at the beginning of next year. The project is assessing the new policy of participatory village governance in Indonesia, especially looking at what kind of governance this policy has introduced and how it addresses the issues of marginality in Indonesia. And I'm very lucky to be supervised by the Venerable Three Musketeers of Indonesianese in UWA, Pak Greg Akiayoli, Ibu Professor Lynn Parker, and Professor David Boucher. As you must know, that PhD is a collective project. Many people involved in one way or another. So hence, acknowledgement is a must. So I want to acknowledge the contribution of a lot of people that helped me in many ways to do my PhD. First, of course, my this thesis and research project upon which it was developed will not be possible without excellent support from my supervision, my supervisor. I thank Pak Greg Gadjah, Ibu Lynn Parker, and Pak David Boucher for their excellent supervisions throughout my PhD period. Secondly, I also want to thank the Australia Award Scholarship that has provided me with full 4-year scholarship that has enabled me to pursue my PhD here in Australia. Next, I want to thank to my home institution, the SMERU Research Institute in Jakarta, that has not only allowed me to pursue PhD study, but also provided me with data support with my fieldwork. I also thank to the administration of Office of Social Science and library staff of UWA that helped me with nitty-gritty of administration-related business and also references. Of course, my huge thanks to all of informant from national level to the village level in Indonesia. Without their willingness to sacrifice their valuable time to share the knowledge and experience, my thesis would never be completed. And not less important is my fellow researcher in SMERU. When I was there joining in a big research on Sentinel village study, and also the local researcher that have supplied me with abundance of data and better understanding of the data. And my friends in social science, of course, in one way or another, helped me with a lot of discussion and companionship. I hope they have already seen the light at the end of the tunnel. The last, of course, but not least, my deep gratitude to my family, especially my daughter, who has shown me what does it mean to be strong. So my presentation will flow from background, and then I will provide research question, research method. I will do a review of some important concept in this project, and then we will discuss the finding, and at the end, I will provide you with some conclusion of this project. Okay. So in this project, the participatory governance referred to the concept used by Archon Fung and Eric Olin Wright to describe the involvement of people in decision-making process on issues relevant to their life that involve deliberation. The concept of broad participation introduced by this approach has enabled people from different backgrounds to take part in the decision-making, including the poor and marginal people, not only open to the broad participation to everyone. This approach has also promised to improve the quality of governance by making it more inclusive and responsive to the need of the people. This approach, in different degrees and with different features, has been in place in Indonesia actually since 1970s, with initiatives like a program for improving the income of small farmers and fishers, program of President Instruction for Left Behind Villages, or IDT, in the early 1990s, Kecamatan Development Project in late 1990s, that turn become Program for Community Empowerment, or Program Pemberdayaan Masyarakat Mandiri in 2000s. These initiatives keep evolving, and in 2014, the government decided to institutionalize the approach into government bureaucracy at the village level by making the approach as a standard procedure in village governance. This policy is based on the Law Number 6/2014 on village. To implement the mandate of the law, the Joko Widodo administration has developed a set of implementing regulation from the national to the district level. This law and the set of implementing regulation that I refer in this project as participatory village governance policy. Although the law was issued in 2014, the idea actually had been around since 2004, when the government and the parliament started to discuss the revision of the package of decentralization laws. However, due to the strong influence of KDP and PMPM with the full support of the World Bank, the idea was just gone. The main purpose of the law is to clarify the position of village and strengthen the capacity of village government. The law introduced the principle of recognition to recognize the variety of village organization and principle of subsidiarity to emphasize the independent position of village, but at the same time still part of the state bureaucracy. Other main feature of the policy are mainstreaming village deliberation as the only decision-making mechanism in the village, and huge amount of village fund. The funds, depending on the fiscal capacity of a district, can be more than 1 billion rupiah per village, or about almost 100,000 Australian dollars. Another context of this project is a still very high percentage of poverty in Indonesia. As you can see here, but the update, I think the latest update is around 10%, after approaching about 9% something in 2019, but rise again due to COVID-19. We expect even higher percentage when National Statistic will release the latest update next month for the based on Sunan's September 2020. The Gini ratio also decreasing a little bit after reaching the highest in Indonesian history in 2014, 43 something. So the research question is, if participatory approach are accommodated in the traditional bureaucracy to improve its responsiveness and inclusiveness, how does it address problem of marginality and poverty? This project is linked to a longitudinal monitoring study conducted by the SMERU Research Institute in Jakarta with the support from the World Bank to monitor the implementation of the VVG policy. The study was conducted from 2015 to 2018 with various components. As you can see, quite a lot of components, all of them qualitative. It also has a quantitative component, but the quantitative component was conducted directly by the World Bank. And then I did my own study, the follow-up study, a two-round follow-up study using qualitative approach as well. The first one is 2018 and the other one 2019. The 2018 focused mostly on the village level case studies, and the 2019 covering national level interview. The follow-up study is qualitative using in-depth interviews. So you see this, quite a lot of component of the Sentinel Village study. If you're interested in this study, just ask me in the question and answer. I can elaborate a little bit more about this project. The research location. I did my fieldwork in 3 different villages in 3 different regions of Indonesia. All of these villages were part of research location by SMERU. I chose the village by considering the welfare level, governance quality, and access to the village. And the data of the village I got from the result of the SMERU monitoring data. The first village, the village of Anggrek in Merangin in Jambi province, is the richest because it is a location for the artisanal mining. But the access is very difficult because it is quite far from sub-district capital, and the main road has almost totally broken due to high tonnage trucks that go through the road bringing heavy equipment for mining activities. It is also the worst in terms of governance because the standard governance mechanism prescribed by VVG policy is not implemented here. There is no village meeting, no transparency at all, and even the village head cannot be reached. But surprisingly, the score of the village in the Village Development Index created by the Ministry of Village is quite high, even higher than Melati village in Mada, East Nusa Tenggara, the third village, that according to my observation is much better than this village. And if you're interested in this index, because this index involved a lot of controversy when it was published in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, because some other ministries in Indonesia also create their own index. So that is quite interesting as well. The second village is Mawar village. Our village is home to tobacco farming. This village was picked for category of average, and indeed, in general, the village that is relying on tobacco farming is on average level for many categories, except the ranking according to the Village Development Index is quite high. As you can see here is 29. The ranking is 29,750. It means from about 75,000 villages in Indonesia. So we have more than 80 combined to the urban areas, but for the rural alone is about 70,000 something. The last village is Melati village in Mada. This village falls in poor category for many variables, except the quality of governance. That is, to my evaluation, is very good. Not like other two villages that experience economic booming due to new economic opportunities and communities, this village livelihood is still based on traditional farming. Another different aspect is high Gini ratio. If the other two villages have quite low Gini, 0.20, this village has 0.32, it's quite high, which is fairly high for rural villages with very traditional economic activities. It is probably caused by traditional institution of Mosalaki. This is they call it the stakeholder of the land of the village. So in the traditional rules, this Mosalaki basically the owner of the whole village. So this is a more detailed ranking of the province, district, and village according to the Village Development Index. I put in schedule 9 for the number for the ranking, because if I put the real one, so people can trace it, and it's not quite good because we will talk about something nasty about some village here. So this thesis is prepared as a thesis with series of papers that are intended for publication. There are 3 or maybe 4, if time permits, that are planned for journal publication. And until now, we have been submitting 2 papers to the journal that not yet published. And hopefully another one will follow in next month, hopefully. About the theory. So this thesis falls in the category of anthropology and sociology of development. The main perspective utilized in this thesis is the new developmentalism as a mode of governance. As a technical term, it was coined more than a decade ago in Latin America to refer to an economic governance phenomenon after neoliberalism or pink tide. Later on, more and more social scientists, mostly in political science and international relations, expand the perspective to cover governance phenomenon in general. Just as neoliberalism is a variegated reality, so is the new developmentalism. Different countries have different features of it. However, they share some features in common, an emphasis on nationalisms and a stronger role of the state, or what they call activist state in economy and development. Although it comes to the fore to contest neoliberalism, new developmentalism does not totally reject neoliberalism. Instead, the regime that adhere to new developmental ideology pragmatically engage in neoliberalism. This is very clear from policies of import substitution and tariff, for example. Another feature that is quite common among new developmental countries is avoiding dealing with sensitive issues, such as law reform, corruption, or good governance, or even deepening democracy. Especially on social policy. For many scholars, such as Maxime Molinox, for example, new developmentalism is just another version of neoliberalism, because what other scholars call new developmental social policy is basically neoliberal in nature. In those policies, there are 3 characteristics in common, namely the encouragement for active participation of the beneficiaries of social programs, the empowerment activities to prepare and equip the beneficiaries with skill and mentality to be able to participate and compete in market economy, and transferring some of the burden and responsibility of the state to take care of the target of social policies to the citizens. In the context of Indonesia, some scholars, such as Ivor Button, for example, have applied the perspective to look at the mode of governance by Joko Widodo regime. And they come up with some characteristics, such as the increasing role of the state and reliance on bureaucracy and other state bodies in setting the path of industrial upgrading and infrastructure development. Here, the state-owned enterprises have become main drivers of economic activities. Nevertheless, the more active the state and the more ambitious the regime, the more inclined it to authoritarianism. Many scholars have shown the tendency of Jokowi administration to illiberalisms and authoritarianisms, among others through its policy to restrict social organization. The latest case is HTI, Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia, retaining the blasphemy law and weakening the Commission of Corruption Eradication, etc. So with the context, let we discuss the finding of this study. So the first finding is that PVG policy have not yet taken the issues of poverty and marginality into account. Table 1 and Table 2 are result of qualitative content analysis of 94 regulations from national to district level in 3 districts where I did my field work. I analyzed how many times the concept related to poverty and gender and women appear in the regulation and how they were used and in what context and for what purpose. And we can see that the idea of poverty and gender equality appear in a small number of the regulation. You can see here. The concept appear most often in sections that stipulate citizen participation in activities such as cooperation or in meetings. But the idea of poverty and gender equality is missing, particularly in a very strategic section of regulation, such as in preamble or principle section of the law, or in ministerial regulation or government regulation, or in regulation that are related to mechanism of decision making or budgeting, and no single regulation that stipulate an affirmative action policy for marginal people. Although in the latter regulation issued after 2018, there are some innovation to create a special meeting for women in the process of village development planning and budgeting. The next finding is, since there is limited encouragement in the regulation to village to address the marginality issue, it is not surprising to find in the implementation that the poor and the marginal people receive almost nothing from the village budget. So the table 3 show what activities in 3 villages that specifically target the poor or marginal group. We can see only Mawar village in Wonogiri in Central Java that allocate a budget for poverty-related activities. But the problem, the activities that finance in this village budget, actually a continuation of initiatives started in 2010. So they are not new activities under PVG regime. Anggrek village in Merangin also allocate a small amount of budget for 2015, but the amount is very, very small, only 213. Lack of attention to poverty and marginality issue in village activities and budgeting is confirmed by larger study using national representative data by Surya Hadi and Izzati. This study shows that village funds have limited impact on poverty reduction because the general economic policy to boost growth by Jokowi administration is less pro-poor. The next finding is that the PVG policy focused narrowly on village economy and infrastructure development. So as you can see in this table, it shows that the budget structure of 3 villages that shared the common focus on village development, According to PVG policy, the nomenclature of village development mostly refer to activities related to village infrastructure development. Activities that have potential to address marginality normally fall under the nomenclature of community empowerment. However, activities under this nomenclature receive significantly less portion of budget. Yes, in some villages like in Melati, for example, for 2015 and Anggrek in 2016 and 17 allocate quite a lot of money for this post, for this nomenclature, community empowerment. But don't fool by that, because in reality, what they do with that budget actually just developing the infrastructure that they label as empowering. So still infrastructure, basically, even though the label is community empowerment. So focus on village infrastructure is not only a unique case of these three villages. This chart shows that the use of village fund nationwide in 2016 that confirmed the finding in the three villages. So mostly more than 80% of the village budget used for infrastructure-related spending. Since there is no significant change in national policy regarding how to use the village budget, we can expect the current pattern will not significantly different from the 2016 case. Okay. Lack of attention to the need of the marginal group, partly caused by the underrepresentation of them in strategic decision making. As can be seen from Table 5, most of meetings in villages are attended by men, and they dominate the discussion. Limited number of meetings are attended by the marginal group, and if they attend, they tend to be silent. PVG indeed provide broad participation platform. However, in reality, the broadest participation only happen in non-strategic decision making. It can be seen from my case studies in three villages. The most strategic decision making in a village is village development planning and budgeting meeting. The meeting started from neighborhood level to collect citizen aspiration that can be very many. From there, the process goes up to hamlet level to create a short list of aspiration for the discussion at the village level. The broadest participation happen at the neighborhood level. The hamlet and the village level meeting are only attended by a representative of each level. And the representative are normally the community figures. So there is no chance for the marginal group to attend that kind of meeting. So the only chance for the marginal citizen to participate is at the neighborhood meeting to channel their aspiration. Whether or not their aspiration will be accepted in the village development planning document is something out of the reach. So if we carefully read the village law, many sections in the law actually show commitment to independent status of village. However, the Jokowi administration has created a very bureaucratic and hierarchical interpretation of the law. The most bureaucratic and hierarchical interpretation can be found in series of ministerial regulations, such as those issued by Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Village, and the Ministry of Finance. Those regulations have transformed the village into a bureaucratic machine. The reason behind such a stringent regulation is to secure the national interest, something arbitrarily determined by the regime. The most important of what they call national interest is to minimize corruption of the village fund and to effectively use the fund to achieve the target of economic growth and infrastructure development in village. Such an interpretation is made possible because of the debatable meaning of subsidiarity principle, namely the principle to create village as local self-government, but still part of state bureaucracy. For many scholars in Indonesia, this principle contradicts the recognition principle, namely the principle to create village as self-governing community. If the former wants to subsume the village under state bureaucracy, the latter wants to create an autonomous village organization. This is a thesis-antithesis relationship without any synthesis. Mimicking the new developmental inclination at the national level, the institutional setup of village is developed to ensure the development activities will run smoothly. This is achieved by strengthening the position of village head and weakening the position of the counterbalance power in the village, namely village deliberative body, or BPD. This policy has made the village governance gone without check and balances mechanisms because of the very unequal power relation among those institutions. And also the village can create their own development plan, but the national government has produced a regulation on annual priority use of the village fund. This is a list of eligible development activities that the village can choose from. And to ensure the village accord with the policy, the national government also gives huge power to the district and sub-district government to supervise the village. Instead of delivering the accountability report to the villager, the village government have to submit it to the district head. In order to secure the national interest, what they call national interest, the regime has also produced more technical instruments, as shown in the table 6. These instruments aim to ensure full compliance of the village. Some of the instruments are intended to oversee and evaluate how the village perform in achieving the target, as can be seen from the first row. Quite a lot of them based on the information system technology. For the stubborn village that cannot or even don't want to comply with the national guidance, there are coercive institutions that will discipline them, as can be seen in the second row. And just as at the national level, there is an inclination to involve military in the outside of security arena, so is at the village level. But the government also has another agent to enforce the compliance that work with skills and expertise rather than with baton and gun. They are facilitator and consultant. Albeit using different approach, the mission is the same, to ensure the village government perform in achieving the national interest. So this is the conclusion. To conclude the above discussion, there are some takeaway from this research project. First, it is clear that PVG policy is designed to achieve the target of economic growth and village infrastructure development. Other aspect of development is positioned as just as supporting for these main goals. Second, to ensure the mission is accomplished, the regime has utilized a hierarchical mode of governance in which the village has been subjected to the power imposition from supra-village institution, from the sub-district, district, province, and national government. Third, such a mode of governance has violated the status of independence given by the law through recognition principle to the village, and even jeopardized village democracy by creating a very unequal power relation in the village, where the village head is very, very dominant, and other institutions, including the village deliberative body, very weak. Fourth, the hierarchical mode of governance has also transformed the village into a robotic machine that only responds to order. In such a situation, it is less likely the village will innovate with village policy, such as to develop their own program to overcome marginality. Last, there is a streamline of approach in governance from national to district level to the local level. Although Indonesia implements decentralization at district level, we hardly seen the commitment to deepen and strengthen district autonomy. Even the reverse movement has become even stronger after the revision of the local government law number 32 issued at the end of 2014. Many sections of the law show a shifting towards centralization, where many authorities of the district government are transferred to the province as the representative of national government in the region. Thus, the inclination to implement a very hierarchical mode of governance at the local level, mirroring the tendency of Jokowi regime toward illiberalism and authoritarianism at the national level. I think that is my presentation. This is some of reference that I use only in this publication, in this presentation. And thank you, and look forward to your response, question, and comment.
I think you can stop sharing the screen, Syukri.
Okay, I'm working.
Yeah, go.
Is it? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we do have about 20 minutes for question time. If you could open on the left the participants column, and then you'll see towards the lower left a blue raise hand. So if you have a question, could you click that raise hand so I can see it on the list in that column, because it's much harder to see people individually raise hands like this on their on their video intake. So any questions? Okay, Katie?
Thanks, Greg, and thanks so much. That was a really interesting and impressive piece of research. Obviously, you've been working in a complex environment, doing a really diverse comparative project. I guess my big question is what next? Obviously, there's some pretty critical evaluations that you've got there, and I'm sure you've got a lot of ideas, some of which you expressed about how things could be improved. So I'm wondering, given also the national governance that you spoke about and the sort of shift towards a more authoritarian sort of approach, how will this research be received, and what are the chances of implementing some of your findings? Thank you.
I answer now, Pak Greg?
Please.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for the question. This is really important question, because that is exactly the homework now. As I mentioned at the beginning, that we had a longitudinal study with the World Bank, and I think not many of the result, yeah, of course, the study has come up with some recommendation, but I don't think quite a lot of the recommendation has been accepted by the ministry. So there are 3 ministries actually that responsible to implement this law. The first one is the Ministry of Village, that deals with the development aspect of village, and the other one is the Ministry of Home Affairs, that responsible to manage the governance aspect of the village, and the Ministry of Finance, that responsible on the structure of budget of the village. And in my paper, in one chapter of my thesis, I discussed the political economy of ministry institution in Indonesia. So we have a very strict and very normative ministry in the Ministry of Home Affairs, and fairly open Ministry of Village. So for recommendation that goes to the Ministry of Home Affairs is quite difficult, because they are quite tough people. They apply a military-like disciplines, so it's quite different. So some of the recommendation have been accommodated mostly by the Ministry of Village. So in Indonesia, they also have kind of consortium for researchers and academia that have the same focus on village governance. But as I show you in some of the slide 22 or 25 about a book written by one of the consultants used by the parliament to develop the draft of the law. He was the main supporter of the law, but later on, since 2018, I think, he turns to be the most outspoken critic, because he has been, because the government doesn't want to hear to the many critics that have been addressed by many people. So yes, this authoritarian government is quite difficult to deal with now. So yeah, of course there is a room through a personal relationship. Based on my experience, I have a personal relationship with some of staff, the key high-level bureaucrat in the Ministry of Village and also in Ministry of Home Affairs. So the most possible way is talk to them as a friend, not as an academia, not as a researcher. And the next step for me is, of course, to finish my thesis. But another one is to look another aspect of this village governance. Thank you.
Okay, Tanya, could you ask your question?
Hi, I've just realized that my partner has been using my Zoom account. So I'm not Tanya, my name is actually Michael. I'm from Murdoch University. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting. I have a question about the 2014 law. As I understand it, it enables villages to choose between adat and dinas structures. I'm wondering if through your research you looked at how these alternative traditional governance structures provide participatory mechanisms for marginalised groups. Do they clash with the developmentalist goals of the national government, and are they perhaps more easily leveraged by marginal groups?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So based on the law, actually the government should develop the special government regulation about the desa adat or the customary village. But unfortunately, until now, we still, I don't hear that the government has already worked on that. There was a debate about to have a kind of the customary village as a formal nomenclature of the village in Indonesia. Part of the debate was the government afraid that most of the village will propose to be a customary village, and that has been the case actually until 2017 in one province alone in Sumatra Selatan, in South Sumatra, if I'm not mistaken. Until 2017 alone, there has been about 4,000 villages, 4,000 something villages proposed to change their status from the regular village into the customary villages. Basically, there is no big difference between the regular village and customary village, except that in the customary villages, they can use their very unique institutions to the extreme level compared to the regular one. Because in the regular villages, even though they do not label themselves as customary, for example, like in West Sumatra, for example, they call themselves Nagari, for example, and they use their local nomenclature. So Nagari and Wali Nagari for the village head, for example, and the structure based on the traditional Nagari structure. But the status basically is just regular village. So until now, the government doesn't issue the regulation, the special regulation that the law mandate the government to create. So until now, we have no idea yet what would the customary village look like in reality. But based on my fieldwork, so there is a customary village next to my fieldwork location in Merangin. I don't see any different, basically. Even this customary village is nearer to the sub-district capital. And I don't see the characteristic a very customary village there actually. So if you want to talk about the structure, for example, it's just like the normal, the regular village in terms of the structure. So I suspect in terms of the position of the marginal people in there will be no different as well. because what happened in the three location of my fieldwork, the problem is that the marginal people have no access to the most important decision-making meeting, because yeah, those meetings only attended by limited number of the community figures, and that is not the unique case of the three villages. I think I have done quite a lot of studies in Indonesian villages since 2007, and I see that it's quite common actually. And about this topic has been written a lot by many people about the elite capture, etc., etc. So I'm quite pessimistic that the transformation of the regular village into the customary village will provide a wider room for the marginal people to access the decision making. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sam, you're next.
Yes, oh, thank you. I wanted to ask whether you could say a bit more about new developmentalism. I know you kind of were focused on Indonesia and particularly how this is being rolled out in particular villages. And just from a comparative perspective, you mentioned that Latin America is a place where new developmentalism sort of was enacted. And I would also throw out there, in Korea, there was actually a movement under a military dictator called the New Village Movement. So I'm wondering, in your kind of background reading, whether you've seen different ways in which this is kind of taking shape across different sort of national contexts.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Yes, one of the political scientists working on Latin America divided into two types of new developmentalisms. The first one, I think developmentalism in general, the first one is the hardcore developmentalism, and we have been quite familiar with this, like Japan, for example, South Korea, and some other hardcore developmentalism that this country have a very strong bureaucracy to really set the path for industrial policy, etc., etc. South Asia, and the other aspect I think is also the inclination to be more authoritarian, and this is quite common not only in South Asia, and recently we also see in Latin America, for example. The case in my point is the fate of participatory approach in Latin America. There is the latest research showing that the participatory budgeting that was very popular in Latin America now almost has no place, because it doesn't really change the situation in Latin America with that policy. So the inclination to be more authoritarian and illiberal, I think, is quite common in most of new developmental set, and it is because new developmental ideology invite more presence of the state. So I guess because without being invited, the state tend to present very strong actually, and now the state is invited straightforwardly. So in the case of Indonesia, for example, we can see the shifting of Jokowi approach in governance. It was not really evident at the beginning of his first term that he has an inclination to mimic the way of the Suharto in the New Order in terms of managing the governance. But in his when he approaching the end of his first term, it's very evident. He's just like another Suharto. And last week, we had seminar in Indonesian study groups with the same, almost the same conclusion, that Jokowi not only partly mimic Suharto, it's totally mimic the policy of Suharto. And the latest case is deploying military in massively in a very open. So even now we have the famous program in Suharto era involves what they call it dual function of military. So it's a military function, the security function, and a social function. Now it's happened. So it is not surprising, I think, if you look at, I also discussed the current index of democracy by economists, intelligence unit. I see not single developmental countries reach quite high standard in terms of democracy. Most of them falls in a democracy with some defect. There are 2 countries in Latin America that achieve full democracy, but that is not developmental state. So I think that is the quite common inclination now. But that is not only in developmental countries, I think. The inclination toward nationalisms, to be selective, to participate in globalization, to implement tariff, import substitution, etc., it's very common now. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, difficult to look at the world, for example, where in Brazil, where new developmentalism was first articulated, you know, we end up with Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the virtual floor? I'm not seeing any right now, so that gives me an opportunity to ask a question.
I think everyone raising hand. You're still mute, Mas Iwan.
Am I not seeing somebody?
Hello, Pak Greg. Me?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Pak Greg. Thank you, Mbak Utari. And very nice presentation, Syukri. My question actually also a question that addressed to me, especially from Pak Greg. It's according to the period of transition of democracy in Indonesia, or the reform period. What do you think, Syukri? Is it, I mean, the Joko Widodo presidency, is it considered as the transition democracy, part of the transition democracy period or reform period, or any other label that we can address to this period under Joko Widodo presidency? Thank you.
Thank you, Iwan. Thank you. This is actually quite far from my focus and my specialty. I'm not really into political science, but that is quite tricky question, I think. Last year in 2019, a journal of critical Asian studies issued a special issues on 20 years of democracy in Indonesia, and I saw there is quite mixed perception about the status of democracy in Indonesia now. But after 20 years experience, if there is transition, I don't think that we are still in transition now. This is my opinion, my humble opinion. You know, that is not my focus, but if you insist me to answer that question, I think we are no longer in the transition after so many years. We have 4 times of election, and the election is for international standard, I think it's among the best election in the world, very participative, and yeah, it's quite good in terms of many variables of democracy. So I agree with you that there is no clear-cut criteria or variable to determine whether we are still in the transition or not. But to me, after so many years, after 4 times of election with a very good quality of election, even though not producing the very good leader, I think we are no longer in the transition anymore. But that is really a common answer, not a specialist answer. Thank you.
Okay, we still have, according to my computer clock, 3 minutes. So time for one final quick question, if there are any from the floor. Anybody raising their hand? Okay, then I'm going to ask a quick question. You mentioned that there was a lot of controversy about the index of the IDM. Could you say a little bit more about the competing indices that have been put forward and whether any of them accommodate marginality and greater democratization and such within the index? And if any of them do, is there any chance that the government might pay more attention to those as opposed to the IDM?
Yes, so in 2017 or 18, actually, there were at least 3 competing index. So the Minister of Village has their own index, and Bappenas also developed its own index, basically almost the same index. And then to make a kind of synthesis of those 2 index, the coordinating Ministry of Social Affairs, Kemenko Kesra, or now is Ministry of Human Development, something, the coordinating Ministry of Human Development, at the time also planned to have their own index. And they said this index is developed after there is a kind of agreement between those parties, the Minister of Village and the Minister of and Bappenas. The big difference is the Bappenas use the data from BPS, National Statistics, and that is a much more reliable data compared to the Ministry of Village, because the Ministry of Village use the data that prepared by the village themselves, not through the mechanism of official statistics. So they asked the village government to fill in the forms, assisted by the facilitator. Most of the information in the this index actually available in the PODES, Potensi Desa, a village potential statistic prepared by the National Statistic, except for, I forgot, maybe 3 or 4 questions. And those questions is about meeting, the number of people who attend the meeting. There is one question I think quite relevant to the marginal people is the participation of women in the meeting. That is the only question that relevant to the marginal people. But the biggest problem is even in the academia, the village potential data that is managed by the National Statistic is not reliable, and that is organized by National Statistic, who is the expert in this area. Now the Ministry of Village developed their own index, and they asked the village head, assisted by the facilitator, to fill in, and they will analyze it by themselves. So many people, the problem is not only about the validity of the credibility of the research, but also how they can reduce the political interference, because we know the minister of village who come from political party has a big interest on this data to show to the president that he has achieved the national interest as mandated by the president. So they create their own index to show to the president that they have worked, they have done a good job. So that is the problem actually. in terms of this, we actually believe more to the, we trust the data from Bappenas actually, but the problem is the data from Bappenas does not cover some of the questions that I mentioned, that about the village meeting, etc. Because the Bappenas data is based on the PODES, and in PODES there is no some of that question. So it is just the problem. Yeah, so many people suspect that the problem is more political than technical. So that is the problem. Thank you, Pak.
Okay, thank you. A very telling note on which to end. So could everybody give their virtual applause in appreciation of our speaker? And we'll be ending the formal part of the seminar, but those who would like to stay on for 10 minutes on screen or such, you can unmute and we can just have some informal discussion. So thank you again for attending, and it will be good if as many of you as possible can attend Lucas Fort's seminar next Friday in the same time slot on the circular economy and waste management in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you, everyone.